As I was working on the book, I was repeatedly struck by a strange phenomenon. The great majority of people who've written about the cross and about theories of atonement in the last 100 years or so, and I've read many of those books, have concentrated not on the four Gospels, but on Paul and Hebrews. Now, Paul and Hebrews are enormously important, but there is a great irony here. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John tell the story of Jesus in such a way as to lead the eye up to his crucifixion. They didn't have to do it like that, but they did. And they do it apparently with the intention of explaining not only how it happened, but what it means. And indeed, the question of how and what it means go very closely together, though this has often been screened out. Now, the early church, and indeed the church right on to the late 16th century, never tried to tie down the meaning of Jesus' death in an official creedal formula. When they were arguing about the Trinity and the Incarnation, the person of Jesus, they made the creeds center on that, but they didn't actually produce a similar formula for the atonement. But this became a problem when the 16th century reformers saw that some of the errors of the medieval church that they were opposing could be traced to or seen in distortions of atonement theology. So they did their best to rule them out by fresh dogmatic formulations in the 16th and 17th century particularly. But in that work, which continues to this day under the rather loose heading of atonement, or under Karl Barth's chosen heading of reconciliation, people have not usually gone to the four Gospels for illumination. What might happen if we did? The four Gospels confront us with a central claim that Jesus of Nazareth was inaugurating God's kingdom on earth as in heaven. That's the overall story that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are telling, as opposed, by the way, to the non-canonical so-called Gospels like Thomas, which don't want heaven to come to earth and which don't see the death of Jesus as carrying any salvific meaning. But Western theology in the last 200 years has had a hard time putting together the kingdom and the cross. They seem to cut against one another. People see the kingdom of God as being about God transforming the present world, and they see the cross as being about God rescuing people from the world. But that is too shallow by half. The first and most important thing to say about the cross in the Gospels is that all four Gospels see Jesus' crucifixion as the moment when and the means by which the Creator God wins the victory over the forces of evil. Kingdom of God, who is in charge at the moment? The prince of the power of the air, the power of darkness, says Jesus in Luke's Gospel, the Satan, the accuser. Something happens at the cross which changes cosmic power relations. One of the first things revealed by the resurrection is that when Jesus was crucified as King of the Jews above his head, this was in fact not simply a mocking slogan, but was telling the truth. This was Jesus' enthronement. When we follow this line through, we can see the beginnings of what we might call atonement theology in the book of Acts in chapter 4. People don't often go there either, but in chapter 4 of Acts, verses 23 onwards, the disciples are faced with the threat of persecution, and they pray a remarkable prayer based on Psalm 2. Psalm 2 describes the rulers of this world raging against the Lord and against his anointed, and the early church pick up that psalm and they say that's exactly what was going on right here. We had Herod and Pilate representing the kings of the earth, symbolizing the coming together of all the evil in the world, doing their worst to Jesus. And as in Psalm 2, the Creator God, the covenant God, responds by exalting his Son and declaring that he is now the true ruler of the world. And the early church, in praying that prayer, invoking Psalm 2, say, "Therefore now, Lord, look upon their threats and grant to your servants to speak the word with all boldness." They've got Psalm 2 in their bloodstream, and they know that it's just been fulfilled. But the point is that evil has gathered together in the persons of Herod and Pilate and all that they represent to put Jesus on the cross. This is the beginning of atonement theology, and this early biblically rooted theology is then reflected in passages like Romans 1, 3, 4, and 5, where Jesus is described as the seed of David according to the flesh, now designated Son of God in power according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection of the dead. The point is that whereas the ordinary revolutionaries of Jesus' day were hoping for a Messiah who would lead them to victory over the Romans, Jesus was constantly hinting at a different victory over a darker enemy. All four Gospels and Acts, Paul and the rest speak of Jesus winning the victory over death and hence over sin and hence over all the powers of the world that have shaken their puny little fists at God the Creator, whose power is the power of love.